Hi folks, you Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about using Trojan horses or impersonators in the political field. Now, the globalists know that they need to control all sides of what is left of the political debate, which isn't really that much across the Western world, but they need to control all the politicians. And they rather get off on the idea of creating and producing a false hope politician, So that's the politician comes out and says, I hear you people, you want migration to stop, mass migration to stop. You want this LGBTQ nonsense to stop. You want to get drag queens out of the primary schools. You want to, you want this and you want this affirmative action nonsense to stop. Race, gender quota. So you want merit to come, and I hear you. I hear what you, and I'm the politician to deliver that for you. Well, I'll fight those globalists. I'll put those global. But in reality, that political candidate, is a globalist stooge. Sure, they're wearing the mask of conservatism, and they're going to do something about immigration, but they're in fact really just globalist controlled. Right from the roots of their hair to their bootlaces. So now to the voters, they think, bootlaces. So now to the voters, they think, he's a politician. He listens and is going to represent the people. The people are going to have a voice again, but in fact, no. And I think the globalists like this idea of creating false hope, then dashing that hope, because that's probably more crushing than because all your energy then is directed into this fake candidate, this candidate who's impersonating a conservative, but in fact is a globalist, and that is a more crushing blow to one's hopes and expectations, I think, than not having that at all, and just the sheer realization that you've been had, and quite treacherously had, in this sort of situation. Now, when you look at, say, the politicians, mass migration to Britain's obviously a big issue, as it is in other countries, but the conservative, or the so-called allegedly conservative politicians, for quite some years now, if you look at, say, David Cameron, that came in after the Blair years, or the hangover from the Blair years, but one of his sort of big promises, I'll reduce immigration. I'll bring it down to between 50 and 100,000 a year, which is, if you're looking at skilled migration, is about the very maximum that you could have in a country like Britain. Skilled migration. I'm not talking about illiterate peasants from the third world, but actually skilled migration, people that speak decent English and so on. Then 50,000 would be at the high end of what would be possible there. But this is the promise. So he's talking to the vote for me, and I'll fix the immigration thing. I'll stop those damn globalists so they're not going to control my government. When I'm prime minister, I'll do. But no sooner does the guy get the gig and get the vote, because he's promised to listen to the people and do what the people want. As soon as he gets in there, that's right, and the mass migration gets even higher. Clearly, and this is an absolutely central plank of the globalist project. So if mass migration is increasing like this, that it's a globalist-controlled government or globalist-controlled politicians that are implementing it. The mass migration is, of course, completely illegitimate. It has no legitimacy. Nobody wants it except the globalists. And so in order to give it legitimacy, the globalists control our supposed governments in the West, so they do it. So then that gives the level of legitimacy, legal and otherwise, that the globalists crave but could never get through means other than treachery and deceit. Now, more recent, and following on from that, you look at after David Cameron, you look at Theresa May. Again, I'll fix immigration, increased even more. Boris Johnson, I'll fix immigration, increases yet even more. So they're all controlled by the globalists, and they're all pursuing the same, net zero climate change policies, which are making a small number of people very, very rich from illicit government subsidies and so on. So the whole, the whole structure of the political machinery in the West has been corrupted there. Every politician that gets up says, that's why Boris Johnson won a huge majority. He was the outsider, the maverick. He was going to take on those globalists and put them in their place, while all the time he was just a globalist flunky stooge, doing exactly what he was told and doing the mass migration, doing the green agenda, the COVID, the whole thing. He was just a globalist little boy. I mean, he's on his knees doing fellatio to the globalists, for goodness sakes. So now coming to a politician that I did think was actually pretty genuine, and that was Georgie Maloney in Italy, and I quite admired the way this diminutive little woman. I mean, I doubt she's even 5 foot tall. I mean, she must be less than 150 centimeters. And how she, I'm a woman, I'm a mother, I'm an Italian, and she said all the right things. And mass migration was going to be stopped, and so on and so forth. And so I had high hopes. Now, I had seen some stories that she was associated with the Aspen Institute, which is one of those globalist activist organizations that actively goes about corrupting Western governments and dispersing patronage to Western politicians and business leaders and so on. So or threatening and intimidating those who don't toe the line. And I'd heard that Georgie Maloney was associated with this Aspen Institute. So and it's definitely a globalist organisation. It just talks in globalist, it's just globalist talking points from end to end. And they talk about improving the lives of people, but if you actually drill down, because you think, well, that means they're concerned about improving my life and the life of a Western citizen, in whether it be Australia or Britain or America or wherever. But actually, when you look at it, they're wanting to improve the lives of the impoverished, illiterate peasant in Africa or Bangladesh. And well, how do you do that? Well, you move them to the West, then, of course. That's how you do it. So that's code speak in Aspen Institute terms, as I understand it. That's code speak for mass migration of penniless, illiterate, peasants from the third world and bringing them to the first world, where, of course, they'll have a higher standard of living than they do in their basket case countries that they come from. So the Aspen Institute is very much a mass migration pushing institute, and Georgie Maloney is associated with the Aspen Institute, and Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of Britain, and also a mass migration advocate and a net zero emissions advocate and so on, is alleged was for some time her mentor or was advising her or something like that. Now, why she'd be getting advice from people like that and not her colleagues in government's beyond me. But now, if you look at Georgie Maloney's government, there's some people in there who are definitely opposed to mass migration and illegal migration, but also they're politicians who believe they're being elected by the people to do a job that the people want done, which of course is quite unthinkable now in the West. All the politicians report to the globalists. They're just little flunky two-bit stooges running around fetching and carrying for the globalists. They're not responsible to the people, far from it. And if the globalists have to rig an election and invent 20 million votes for a presidential election, they'll do it. And they're in control now, not the people and not the functionaries that once were responsible to the people. So Georgie Maloney is surrounded there are a number of people in her government that believe they represent the people and are opposed to illegal and mass migration. Yet somehow their voices have been silenced. You almost hear nothing from them now. How is that? How did that happen? And Georgie Maloney has gone from being a firebrand, Mussolini in high heels and all this stuff that the media condemned her as a fascist and a Nazi and so on. And now, months into her premiership, she's cozying up to the super pro-globalist politicians. In addition to that, she's really given way on all the globalist issues, the mass migration, the climate change stuff. She's done some small pushing back against doesn't allow transgender people to go in the Miss Italy contest, the beauty contest. Yeah. But that's okay, fine. I guess that's a symbolic thing either way, and better it stopped than is given the green light to go ahead. but other than some very small symbolic stuff, she's given way on, and as far as I can tell anyway, given way on all the globalist main issues, the migration, the whole thing, and for some reason the illegal migration's more than doubled since last year, and yet somehow her government is powerless to stop it. They just can't do it, and the cases where they're heard by the courts, it always seems to be the most activist judge gets to hear the case and decides in favour of the illegal immigration and so on, suggesting that it's a setup, to stack deck, and they're all playing with a bunch of marked cards to begin with. But this is very concerning. But you see this pattern now. I thought Maloney was different, but you see this pattern where the globalists want to say, well, let's have a candidate for the other side that says they're going to stop mass migration, they're going to stop the climate change nonsense, and then we'll get people to vote for them. They get a big majority, then they'll be in government for years. But really, they're our boy or our girl all along. And no, I don't want to sort of be that sort of conspiratorial, but why is it that these people talk so tough about fixing things like migration, but then as soon as they get into government, it can't be fixed? No, we need all these illiterate peasants. The economy needs illiterate peasants. It does. And then you try and say these illiterate peasants are all rocket scientists. They're not. So this is it. So that Aspen Institute, along with the World Economic Forum and those sort of things, they really have a stranglehold across all Western governments, and deciding who runs for office, the sort of funding and support they get, how the media treats them. Because one of the reasons why you would vote for, if you were an Italian citizen concerned about the mass migration, one of the reasons why you would vote for somebody like Maloney is if all the press were doing a pile-on or calling her a Nazi and a fascist, then you go, well, screw you guys, I'm going to vote for her, when in fact she was a Manchurian candidate all along. You've been fantastic to add your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.
What's that thing called? The Austin Institute?
Aspen.